Welcome, affiliated listeners, to what obviously you could visually see, and if auditorily, you won't be able to see anything, but a different kind of episode with an amazing guest. I'm, of course, joined by my co-host, who you can now see is taller than I am.
Hey,
Thomas, how are you doing today, Thomas? Should I look at you or should I look at you?
I feel like we're on like a morning talk show. This is
I
really
know.
fun.
Should we put vodka in our coffee cups or something? You know, be Huda and Kathy Lee. I think that aged us.
Age you.
Age me. But we have an amazing guest today, too, that we're going to be discussing, I think, something really important, which is the state of native media buying, the native networks out there. We know right now, especially in paid media, there's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of changes. It feels like it's happening fast. And oftentimes when changes happen fast, you could feel like you're being left behind, or in a worst case scenario, you could be left behind. On top of that, though, we're not just going to talk about that because our guest has even more to share with us. We're so excited to get extra value. He has another tidbit and another very important thing that he wants to discuss about success, not only in native, but really just in general, in terms of being successful as a media buyer, as a business owner in these next coming years, and I would say even in these next coming weeks, things that you should be focusing on. So we are so excited to have a two-time podcast guest because we love to get him repeat times. We have Andrey. Andrey, how are you doing today, man?
Amazing. Thanks very much for having me for the second time. And I've been very much anticipating this meeting. So it's awesome to see you both once again. And I have to say this new format certainly works well. I think you should keep it. You know, it definitely gives the vibes of a morning talk show, but I think that's the whole point, you know, more of a relaxed environment, but also
tea in the morning.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. I'll do it as well.
That's great. Well, at first we need to acknowledge the most important thing, the elephant in the room, which is
right.
Damn if that is not a delightful sweater. I mean, just pure dapperness. Andrey's always the best dressed man in the room. And
you're very kind.
I have to acknowledge you for great hair, great flow, and a really great sweater too.
Thank you very much. I should have put on amazing trousers as well, but let's not mention this.
Video teasers for our audio listeners today.
Yes, exactly. But go to YouTube, watch it there, right? Anyway, as we kind of mentioned before, we'll jump right into it. I think one of the big things that a lot of people are feeling a lot of concerns about are just paid media. CPMs are changing, conversions seem to change. Oftentimes there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're hearing a lot of affiliates, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, and I would say even sometimes in native, seeing things not succeed in the way that they were before. So I'd love to just kind of get things started talking to you about maybe what are some of the changes and things that you're seeing in native, knowing that you have a really holistic view and a large view of everything that is native, which we'll talk a little bit more about why that is in a second or a little bit later. But yeah, just give us a sense of maybe what are the changes that you're seeing, Andrey, in native right now from maybe what people might have noticed last year.
I think, well, even not from last year, but overall, I would say the state of native is certainly improving. I mean, I entered the native game in 2018 when I started working for Taboola. I managed to grow from like an individual contributor, sales executive, to a more of a management position in Europe. And I've definitely noticed how the overall quality of the traffic has been improving significantly. And you can definitely measure this by conversion rate, by the types of publishers who are signing up for monetization by one of the named premium traffic sources. So the overall quality is improving. The amount of traffic is improving. There are new incremental sources of traffic are appearing. At Taboola, at Outbrain, and JD. So new digital property types. I'll give you an idea, for instance.
Yes, I say that.
So let's say.
Tell us more about that.
So because traditionally, native is considered to be below the article, right? Native is the state of mind where people sort of enter when they finish reading the article, and they're thinking, well, what should I read next, right? What should be the next entertainment piece? And this is why the original term for native was teaser networks. So like these networks for read more. That's a term mostly used in Eastern Europe, which is one of the markets I used to oversee at Taboola. Now, these days, it's not just mid-article. I mean, companies like Taboola have digital properties on mobile phones. For instance, the most recent integration with Apple News. Companies like Outbrain have their own DSPs, which means there's more other potential placements, or let's say they've recently announced their merger with a company called Teats, which is mid-article videos and other video placements. So it's no longer below the article. It's the monetization of the open web, which means those media buyers who are acquiring traffic from these named traffic sources, being this Taboola, Outbrain, MJD, Media or Riff Content, gotta mention them all. There's plenty of them. They're no longer buying just below the article, whether it's a certain intent. They now have to consider that the user is behaving differently depending on the placements, and they need to adjust their copy accordingly, which is number one. So quality, types of placements, the amount of traffic is certainly growing and improving.
Well, I'd love to.
And
I
I
want to
think,
stop and because you said some things I think really excited me, and especially
mhm,
just some of the new sources and some of these new areas. Which
correct.
has to be really exciting in terms of what that could do to not only expand demographics, but be in some of these emerging, I would say, content distribution areas. So you mentioned like Apple News, and then also some of the video in article video stuff. On the Apple News, can we just pause on that? I'd love to talk a little bit more about maybe what what's significant about that in terms of how that works with native and maybe some of the results you've maybe been seeing with people on that, because I think that's really interesting. Primarily, Apple News is more of an algorithmically fed news feed, right? So they're going to curate from all over the web to give you a centralized place. So I'm curious how native kind of works in that.
So I left Taboola pretty much right before the announcement with Apple News. So I never got to learn how the integration actually worked. But as someone who is still in the native space and someone who is buying Apple News, I gotta say the traffic is incredible. So if you're not buying it yet, guys, you should certainly consider it. It's very affordable. It's converting like crazy. And the only downside, I would say, it's very difficult to get your ads to appear on Apple News because you need to be pre-qualified by the policy team of Taboola if you're running with Taboola. Now, Apple News is a logical development of the existing technology that Taboola developed, I believe, in 2017, which is called Taboola News, which is a news aggregate with the sole idea of monetizing Android phones. Because Apple News has been an aggregate from the very beginning. It basically have different digital news outlets all appearing in one feed. Now, Android phones, Android powered phones, never had this aggregate. They would always be individualistic about it. You would have, let's say, Sony news, you would have Samsung news, and all sorts of news, which would be specific for the to the smartphone manufacturers. So Taboola decided to provide this sort of omni-channel, omni-aggregate for everything, which worked perfectly well. So monetizing Apple News only makes sense because they already had the technology for it. Yes, sure, it's a new type of placements because we mostly use it on our mobile phones. At least I do, for instance. And I think, statistically, people tend to use it mostly on mobile phones versus mobile devices versus desktops. So it's a different type of intent. It's no longer below the article. I mean, if you open Apple News and you're in one of the countries which are being supported by Apple News Taboola monetization, you'll see that they're mid-article as well. And it's no longer below the article the same way you would see the recommendations powered by Taboola and Outbrain, for instance. It's no longer, a mix of editorial and sponsored content. Now it's just a banner. So what's the difference between a banner, let's say, a traditional banner and a native banner on Apple News? There's very little difference. Whilst traditionally, the way native would stand out and compare against display, you would naturally say, well, hey, it's the right place. A banner can be easily missed due to banner blindness because it's just all over the place. Frankly, they can be annoying. The user experience is poor, hence low CTR. Whilst below the article, you would typically see much higher CTRs because people are recipient to the idea of reading more content, especially if it mixed well and designed well into this endless feed that looks like an editorial recommendation, even though it is not always an editorial recommendation. So you would see, let's say, sponsored content, editorial content, sponsored content, editorial. And if you're someone who's scrolling through it, you would naturally assume that everything is a recommendation by the trustworthy website that you're on. This is why, higher CTRs, high engagement rates, and higher post-click performance on native against, let's say, something you would typically see on display networks.
And how does the Taboola Yahoo announcement? I know it's been a little dated since now that we're recording, but since you've been on this Taboola Yahoo partnership, I guess you could call it, has come together, and it seems like
Yeah, I mean, there was like a 30 or 25% acquisition
yeah.
by Yahoo. I'm not aware of the legal terms anymore,
Sure, yeah.
so
So
I
is
gotta be
that when
careful.
you know
Gotta
like
be
traffic
careful.
quality is getting better on native? Is this kind of why we're seeing this? It's like Apple News is now available, all these different Yahoo publishers, but I think people don't realize how
I think
many Yahoo is still very relevant, and they've got Tech Radar and some of these big aggregate sites out there. Is that a big reason why the quality is getting better? Is that there's these types of hubs on the native networks now? Like,
I think it actually works both ways.
mhm.
It's like a chicken and egg problem. What comes first, premium traffic or more premium publishers? I mean, you can't have one without the other. So I suppose all these companies that I mentioned, Tabulas and Outbrains of the world, even MJD. I mean, traditionally, a lot of people would consider MJD as, at least, when I joined Taboola, they would consider MJD as a traffic source which would have lower quality than, let's say, Taboola. And these days, they have all the verifications, they have all the partnerships with some premium websites all around the world, which means they're really, really working hard to be positioning themselves as super premium. And to me, it's actually, I had a conversation the other day with someone who was really rooting for Google as like the most premium traffic source. And my counter argument was, why is it premium? Simply because it's the biggest? Can you actually control what's going on inside the black box? Can you pick every single placement? Do you have control over the placements? Can you view how your ads look like at this specific placement? No. So why is it premium? Google is awesome. It's a huge company. We're all are using it, and it's not an attack on Google. I'm just saying that the assumption that something's premium is based solely on the idea that if someone's the biggest, probably they are the most premium one, which is not necessarily true, because premium comes from the ability to control your environment and be able to assess it and make your own judgment whether it's premium for your specific brand. On native, you have this control. On Taboola, Outbrain, even on MJD recently, on Baidu, you can see all the placements. You have the direct control over these placements, and you can view through all the websites and pick the ones that you like. So, isn't this the most premium? And to answer the very original question about the state of native, native is as premium as it's ever been. So now is the time to run it, especially when it comes to brands who've been sort of hesitant to run it for many years, hence the reputation of chum boxes. Because let's say if you check Wikipedia for all the traffic sources, let's say Taboola, and you would be like, okay, what's that? Oh, it's a chum box. No, that's the reputation from like the early 10s, where there used to be only affiliates running on these platforms. But that's no longer true, because, I mean, in my days, we used to launch some of the most premium websites. We as an agency are supporting, because, hi, I represent an agency and an education platform. But we as an agency are spending close to 100 mil this year promoting premium brands on Taboola, Outbrain, MediaGo, and MJID. And some of these premium brands are actually Wikipedia brands. So let's say the largest insurance provider in Germany, which is a very old-fashioned country, and it's a rather old-fashioned brand who really, really cares about their brand image. No way they would appear on the placements they cannot control and cherry pick. Native offers this.
How does compliance work with all that? I think that's always been a question mark for people who are either doing some native or haven't. It's like, oh, I can't get X approved on Y network. But is it more of an issue that if you're trying to get listed on, say, a premium publisher that Taboola or Outbrain has access to, that you might not be able to get your really aggressive ad featured on that publisher, but you could on other places on that?
Correct.
And actually, before we do that, I just want to, just for the listeners, for those who aren't familiar with what we're talking about with not having control on Google and those placements versus having control in a premium network with what we're talking about with native access, it gives you access, really referencing like Google Performance Max, which is really moved to, where for those that don't know, you load in your creative assets and the algorithm of Google decides where they're placed, which could sound great when you see it, sometimes see some numbers, but it, like you mentioned, there's no control, there's no access to know what's winning, and you're not going to get better. It truly is a black box of marketing, which, like you said before, could be a huge detriment if you want to know and have control or even have feedback to what's working. It takes away so much of what you want and almost brings you down to a common average. So just wanted to highlight that for the listeners. So we'll go back
No,
to
that's
the top.
that's a very good point. And even on social, it doesn't have to be Google. Again, it's not necessarily just downplaying Google. With social, you also don't have that much control over where exactly your ads are going to be, because there's a lot of user-generated content around you, and the assumption that the safest space, because there've been some moderation rules implemented, and the community is is behaving better than they used to. But even then, you don't quite know where exactly ads going to appear. You just know that it's going to appear at the right place and it's going to be shown to the right people, but you don't quite know what would be the neighbors of this
So
place.
I'm changing my question now. I guess
Sorry about that.
No, it's my fault if anything.
yeah, it's definitely
Yeah,
possible.
definitely.
Like if you're crafting an ad and you get that specific for a specific site or like where it's going, are you actually tailoring that ad to look as native as possible for the maybe the article it's showing up in or where on the page it is, and then the bridge page is mimicking where they're coming from? Like, how, I guess, can you walk through like what are some of these campaigns you're seeing that work really
Yeah.
well in this like?
Let me break this down in a couple of parts. Part number one, do you need to tailor your ads? Yes, of course. Your ads need to be newsworthy, because when you're running something on native, you cannot be running the same flashy and glossy ads you would be running on social, for instance, because on social it's about standing out. It's more like, hey, click on me. You have so much stuff. You have so much stuff going on your feed. You need to click on me. This is why banners tend to be very elaborate. You're trying to stick as much information on a single image or a video. On native, in fact, you need to be as well native as possible. You need to be newsworthy. You need to, stick in a picture of a smiley person and create a headline which would say something like, I don't know, something what an editor would put on their website, on their newspaper. So a bit old-fashioned. Certainly, it's not something that typically, let's say, 20-year-olds are recipient to. But that's just the type of audience you're dealing with. It's mostly like 40, 45 plus type of audience. So yes, you do need to tailor it. You do need to make it newsworthy, because you need to produce an intrigue, which will later be taking the users on the exploration path, which is an advertorial, which is later taking to a landing page. So it's a 3-step funnel. Now, regarding the control of the environment, you can certainly pick the context you like. So if you are promoting something sports related, by all means appear on the sports pages. You can pick the type of context you would like to be appearing on. And number two, there is also an algo. I mean, some platforms are more elaborate than the other ones, for sure. And but in most of the cases, the algo is, Taboola, Outbrain, whatever. The algo is a very curious one. So the more information you feed it, the better it gets at finding the right placements. So it's still, just like Google, it will find the right audience to maximize the performance, but it will use the setup that you will basically create yourself. Hence the word network. You're picking the right publishers you would like the algo to operate with, right? So it's not like you're just running on a network of websites you have no visibility of. No, you're picking the websites, you're picking the placements, you're crafting the right story, and then the algo does the thing. And a media buyer is someone who's sort of correcting it and mediating it.
This is making more sense to me now. Why a lot of, I think, our traditional media buyers that run on YouTube or Facebook or Google can have problems trying to transfer over to native. I've always been like, why don't more people run native? Because it's always been this like, the ones that do it really well, but you don't see many doing it. This makes more sense now, because yeah, the strategy is a lot different as far as like how you actually go about buying the media and creating that ad. It seems like the ad creation, the copy ideation part is always the most important thing whenever you're media buying. But it seems you have to be a lot more maybe nimble and making different types and kind of test types versus throwing it into these black box algorithms that will serve, and you kind of just keep feeding it different things. You have to be maybe more mindful. It sounds like, please correct me if I'm wrong, about how these show up and where these show up.
Well, at least it sounds like for like premium, with the premium mentality of getting access to these huge publishers and traffic that I would say traditionally has been held by the largest companies out there to get access to. It does require, from what Thomas is saying, a little bit more precision, but which almost exciting, because it kind of reminds me of like the Mad Men days. It's like your chance to be like a traditional, suit and tie, big time, advertiser.
I'm an advertising because of this TV series, I have to say.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it
Sweater
says
makes sense now.
yeah, exactly. There's scotch somewhere. We
Yeah.
just we could sense that it's there with some mahogany.
Just water for now.
But is that so? Yeah, back
Still
to the
early.
question. Is it kind of that more? You really have to take more precision and thought into your creative.
Yeah, I would say native certainly requires a lot more work at the very beginning. I mean, as an agency, like our company operates as an ultimate enabler. And I want to just, stress this out. So when we're working with someone, we do not necessarily support them as an agency. We also happen to have like our own proprietary native specific education platform where we, consult people, we give them like a bunch of discounts, and we offer them our media buying trainings related to native. And every time we're having a conversation with someone who is a newbie, what we're pushing for is the right expectation. Because if you're coming with the expectation of creating just a couple of flashy ads and you're going to test them on a span of 2-3 days, no, take your money elsewhere. And it's just not me being rude. It's just me setting the right expectations, because native is about finding the right story, finding the right angle. So you would need to spend some time on coming up with a couple of different stories which would resonate with the audience you're trying to sell to, or trying to generate leads from. And if you were launching a brand, we would come up with maybe 15, 20 iterations during the first 2 to 3 weeks. So it takes a lot of content and creative work, which is number one. Number two, it's about finding the right placements. Because when I'm saying content in terms of numbers, the first thing I'm looking at is the engagement on the page, which is measured by LPCTR and the time spent on site. Only when this is something that I'm satisfied with, I'm proceeding to optimizing the publisher list. And this is where I'm looking at my CPM. At this stage, I don't even care about my CPA, because I'm in this investment mentality. It's not me saying, oh, I'm going to test for 3 days. No, it's me saying, hey, I don't need 20K, right? I do need only if I'm promoting a very complicated brand. So I need to test lots of storylines, and I need to test a large geo. If I'm testing rather small geo, and if I'm testing a brand that has, let's Taboola or Outbrain or whatever, been launching for years, so they have enough data. So I don't really need to spend a lot of data to teach the algo. It'll take me a couple of grand. But I would still need to assess the LPCTR, the engagement, then proceed to the VCPMs. So I would need to see which publishers are working well for me engagement-wise. And also, brand-wise. Do I want to be seen on these websites, or do I want to be seen on these websites? Or do I not care? The only thing I care about is the performance. And in this case, I'm looking at my VCPM, VCTR, and only then I'm starting to look at my CPA. And it's absolutely normal to see the outrageous CPAs during the first couple of days, and even the first week. Let's say we're launching with a brand, and the brand's like, oh, wow, we lost $300 this week. I'm like, why do you care? Honestly, if you can't afford spending a couple of hundred on investment, why are we in this business together? We're trying to create something that is stable and scalable, because on native, you can easily spend, well, not easily, but let's say 50, 60 grand a day. And in some cases, you can spend 100K plus, and combined, Taboola and Outbrain, we're spending over 200K a day. And with MJD and with Baidu Media Go. So you can scale to these amounts, but you need to, embrace this investment mentality. So you lose a couple of hundreds of bucks, maybe even a couple of thousands of dollars, because you need to buy this data, which is the LPCTRs, the VCPNs, the CTRs. You need to find the right story, the right publisher set lists. And once you do, you optimize toward their CPAs, and then it only goes like this. So I think one of the fundamental differences with social, it tends to go like that.
Place, yeah.
Yeah, it looks
like a pulse of a healthy person.
Yeah.
With native, it goes like this: very unhealthy pulse, but certainly very healthy performance.
Up and to the right.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great, because we do see a lot of people that where Facebook and some, I think, traditional media can feel very exciting at those peaks, right? But it just could collapse just as fast as it seems to move. So it could create so much, I guess, instability, which can be frustrating. It's hard to plan on. It's hard to predict for. And some people that might have been riding that dragon for a long time, you've learned a lot about marketing, but you might just be tired of feeling like you have a winning campaign only for it to collapse 4 days later or 3 days later, and you have to start the process over again. So like we were saying, make your investment matter for the long run. It might be a little bit slower right from the get-go, But if you do it correctly, it's going to grow into something that's sustainable. And obviously, you and your agency would know, considering the amount that you're spending, that's not willy nilly, right? And I would say there's many media buyers on tier one social couldn't fathom that kind of amount on an annual basis. They'd love to, but the instability doesn't necessarily make that easy. So, with that being said, because we kind of go back to some things and seeing what you guys are spending across platforms, I'd imagine one of the biggest challenges is it just, and Tom's commented before, that transition might be hard. So for those that are listening to this podcast right now, I think there's some that are native, like, oh, good, it's great to know we got some new tidbits of new areas and new places to focus as these networks are becoming even more premium. But those that might be frustrated with their Facebooks, their YouTubes, and their Google, where could they maybe go to get education and information to find success? Where'd be the place for that?
Native Hub.
Native Hub. Okay. So tell us a little bit about Native Hub. What is that?
So that's the education platform we created. So I think that's a sort of a segue into a conversation about my professional career, because I really enjoyed it at Taboola. I loved it. Honestly, I can't say that I've worked at 100 companies to say that Taboola is the best one, but it's certainly, like, I've had one of my best experiences at Taboola, and some of the people who are my colleagues right now at the agency are my colleagues at Taboola, some of my close friends right now. There's someone I met at Taboola, and the culture there was fantastic. So maybe I should stop singing the praises. But I really enjoyed it there. But at the same time, I was quite curious whether there is more out there, whether I could learn about other traffic sources. And at the same time, education has always been my passion. I mean, I started doing webinars. I think we did a podcast roughly at that time. Was it 22? I think it was in 22.
I think so.
I think
yes.
so. Yeah, time is hard to remember.
Yeah.
But it happened within some 2-year period.
Some 2 years ago, exactly. So, I mean, that year alone, I did about 13 podcasts and webinars altogether. Just, it wasn't something I was paid for, but I was genuinely curious whether I could educate a lot of people and at the same time generate a lot of leads for my main line of work. And then, I was curious whether I could do the same with other traffic sources, but obviously I couldn't develop in this direction working for a single company. So I left it, joined forces with a couple of friends I used to work with, and with one of our biggest clients at Taboola. So we formed Zivio, which is the agency in education. And again, as an agency, you can only take so many clients without really scaling your headcount. So our previous, our CEO, his previous company used to be called 6H. He used to be CEO there as well. And they grew to like 85 or 90 people over a span of like a year and a half. And basically, his name is Nadim. And Nadim mentioned that, it was a real struggle because they were growing way too fast and they weren't really accounting for this growth when they were just getting started. And neither of us wanted the repetition of this. So we wanted to remain a lean organization where we're only focusing on hiring the most senior talent. Like, let's say our media buyers are managing 1.5, 2 million a month. So we don't have that many media buyers, right? We have a couple, but they're very senior and they work with big budgets. So that's what we're doing. And we're using all this media buying knowledge to basically collect enough information and teach to others. Because as I mentioned, we can't really support every single brand or every single affiliate in the world. We don't have the capacity, otherwise we would have to hire thousands of people. Rather, we decided to collect all this information and stay on top of the game. May not necessarily be the best one, but at least stay on top of the game, collect enough information, and share it in a centralized way. Because there is plenty of amazing education, sources. Kudos to Spark. Spark's fantastic. I learned a lot from it myself. But that's just very few examples like this. In most of the other cases, information is not centralized, it's decentralized, meaning that, you need to go to like tens of different forums, the STMs, the Atilas, the Affiliaramas, Affiliate Fixes, and the Warriors of the world, and hope that someone who left a comment 2 years ago was right.
I had the same issues you did, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a bit of a gamble, because if you manage to get a good mentor, I had a very good mentor in 2018. I had someone who like really stood up for me and taught me a lot. And I had a couple of people like this. So I was quite fortunate. But at the same time, I've met quite a few people who spent lots of money paying to coaches who charge them thousands of dollars for giving them information they could have got for $25 on Fiverr or whatever, like the education platform. So we came up with this idea of creating the hub where we would put information that we've collected and keep collecting. We'll record the trainings and we'll do consulting hours. And like we plug in like a bunch of discounts there. But the whole idea behind it is that people pay a subscription fee and they get the trainings, they get discounts, and most importantly, they get consulting, not just from us, but also from the traffic sources. So we would have these joint sessions occasionally, let's say with MGID or with Outbrain. Soon with content, we're working the training there as well. So they would be able to, come and ask their questions and learn. Because the trouble is that there's so many brands, there's so many affiliate agencies who want to start with native, but they would typically start via self-service, right? And that was a big problem, let's say, at Taboola, because there were so many people asking for my attention or my team's attention, but we just couldn't cater this interest. Because let's say if I was to have a conversation with every single client and I dedicate 2 hours of my time to every single one of them, my success rate for launching them would be like 100%. But I could not afford spending 2 hours on each call. I could only afford spending half an hour on a few calls. Now, and the whole, sort of compensation model was based on the idea that you would have half an hour calls. Now, how can you pitch native in half an hour when you're pitching, let's say, you're not pitching the biggest traffic source in the world, that's Google. You're not pitching the biggest social source, which is, let's say, either Facebook or TikTok, depending on the perspective. You're pitching diversification, you're pitching risk, and you're pitching a platform which is not very easy to master, especially if you're coming with the mentality of social. How do you pitch this in half an hour? Especially if you say, hey, I need 10 grand from you, but I can't really explain why. Now, if I was to spend 2 hours on the call, I would say, well, hey, native is this and this and that. Let's say Taboola in that particular instance is this and this and that. ClickBank is amazing because VSL's work resonates very well with the 45 plus audience, and you need to spend 10K because you need to collect X amount of clicks, multiplied by Y amount of publishers, and this is basically your maths. But I don't have time for this. So we created Native Hub basically to not to repeat ourselves way too many times. And we did this in partnership with other traffic sources because, and I promise the monologue's about to finish.
Yeah, don't worry, man.
There are so few search engines and there are so few social media platforms which are household names. I mean, when you're searching something, you don't say I'm searching something, you're saying I'm Googling something. Even though companies like Yahoo are massive, they're not as massive as Google. Now, when it comes to social, there's plenty of social platforms. But most of the times when you're speaking with a brand, you're saying what traffic source you're running, they're like Google, Facebook. How many people are saying we're running Reddit, we're running Pinterest, we're running Snapchat, we're running something smaller? Not that many. But if you ask about native, people are like, we're not running native because there's just so many platforms. Where do we start? I can probably name you like 20 different native sources right now, starting from the biggest one and finishing with the ones that are very local. So I think the future of native is related to consolidation, which is already happening, and we're noticing this. I mean, companies are buying each other.
As I say, we'll talk about that in a second too on the consolidation side.
Yeah. But like we wanted to centralize the knowledge and basically generate more exposure for these companies.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of content for Google and Facebook.
More on native than so native. I was just looking through your site, native-hub.io. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because nativehub.com was taken.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm reaching out to these guys. If you're watching this podcast, please do reach out to me. I'm ready to talk.
I've been trying to find them for years. So who's like, so someone looking to learn more about native, or do it themselves, or hire an agency, those are kind of the right fits, kind of either media buyers or brand owners who are looking to
Correct.
explore native.
Native Hub is for everyone. Native Hub is for everyone. The whole idea is that regardless of your experience and seniority, you can find stuff that would interest you anyway. If you're an absolute newbie, you just heard about native yesterday.
Well, if you want,
there's like 35, huh?
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, I was going to say, so I think one of the things that's really powerful, one, thanks so much. I think Native Hub is huge, right? We talked about the power of this premium network, but the accessibility, I think, jumping into it it's different than what a lot of people got trained up to. So you need to have that information. Not to mention there are disparate networks. But you guys have done such a great job, and I think bringing that consolidation not only educationally, but one of the things, and we were talking about this, is kind of at the beginning. Hey, here's the secret: this idea of what you really need to focus on. It should be very important in your business as things change, as things sometimes feel like they're getting more challenging because markets are shifting. And that's the idea of collaboration, bringing people together. So you mentioned there's consolidation happening in native through, acquisitions and mergers. But you and your company actually did something really exciting that had never happened before at Affiliate Summit East a couple months ago with this idea of collaboration. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's such an important and critical theme for everyone to hear out here. Sometimes in times are good, it's easy to succeed by yourself, but power and success can really, really be accelerated and almost guaranteed through collaboration. And you just had a recent, very great example of that.
Thank you very much. It really means a lot, and I really appreciate it. And that's actually one of the reasons we're having this podcast, is because we managed to meet at this event and reconnect, which is wonderful. Now, I think first and foremost, personally, I and all the amazing people I'm working with, we're all sharing this idea that there are so many native traffic sources that this artificial competition is not really helping them. They're just competing with each other, but in fact, they should serve as a united front against much bigger players. And I know there have been attempts to sort of consolidate. Let's say Taboola and Outbrain were supposed to merge, they never did. Now Outbrain is merging / acquiring Teats. Taboola was partially acquired / merged with, there was like 30% acquisition by Yahoo. Then Outbrain acquired Ligatus, I believe, a few years ago, and Zimanta. So there is certainly some consolidation attempts, but they're not enough, because there's still quite a few companies that are competing with each other, whilst they should be competing with someone who's much bigger than them, if they would really want to first win over the audience, win over the attention. And I don't want to say win over the money, because what they're really competing for is time. Like, there's only so much time you can physically spend being on the internet a day. So if you want to make more money, in fact, you need to be winning more time that the users are interacting with your specific company. Now, what we managed to do is something what I personally was trying to arrange for almost 2 years. So we had the first, and I never managed to, had never managed to, because obviously working for Taboola, you can't really reach out to Outbrain and say, hey guys, how about we share a stage together? I'd be like, who are you once again? But I think kudos to all these guys. I think one of the partial reasons for the success of the panel that we did is that we managed to maintain very good relationships with, I managed to maintain good relationships with the team of MJD and Outbrain, and even by the media go throughout the years, even being on the competitive side. But now that we're not really competing with them, but Ziva is in fact leveraging all these platforms and building good relationships. Last year I did reach out to all of them and I said, well, let's do it. And the initial response wasn't particularly promising. And plus we couldn't really find the right platform to do it, because we wanted to do it in Europe with one other conference, but they weren't quite interested in this. So we decided to find the right country, which is easy for everyone logistically, plus the one that would give us the most exposure, and the ones that would be recipient to the idea of doing the native panel. So we ended up connecting to Affiliate Summit East, and then I started sort of pushing in different directions and speaking with everyone more proactively, and I think we managed to get on board. I think MJD were the first ones to get on board with this, and we're like, you know what, let's do it. It should be fun. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? So kudos to them for being great sports. And then sort of everyone followed, Riff Content, MediaGo, Outbrain. Strangely, Taboola was the last one to jump on board, even though I personally expect them to say yes, the first ones. But maybe I was biased because I worked with them for many years. But it was tough. It's large work and it's a public company now. So they no longer can just say, hell, let's do it. They need to go for like a couple of internal discussions. So we managed to get all the traffic sources on the same stage, and arrange a panel where you would have senior representatives, so director and VP level of all the traffic sources, share the same stage with Nadim, our CEO and founder, good friend, and talk about native and basically cover the subjects of being a united front against the duopoly of social and search. So being the third household, I don't want to say name because native is not a name; it's more of a like industry. But let's say, yeah, be a household name, be a household choice for the marketers.
Love that. Well, I just think it's such a powerful story and something that oftentimes is easy for to get. We know that marketing and business is competitive. We all, at some level, entered with an idea of winning. But sometimes winning could get defined as just me winning and winning over others versus winning overall. And that's such a great story because the impact, as you know, we talk more about the power to native, is that all those networks will see a lift and the people and the attention that they get, right? As
Correct.
people continue to understand.
Correct.
I think that's something that could echo in every one of our listeners' businesses today. If there's something you're struggling with, if there's something, essentially a ceiling you feel like you're hitting, and even if you feel like that ceiling is collapsing on you right now, reaching out, and I think they fix it yesterday. But if you reach out and collaborate, powerful things could happen. Whether that's going from your current job to creating an agency and an education platform that is, guys, I'm telling you, if you aren't a native, being able to have a hub like this that's going to be unbiased and give you the information you need to succeed, and succeed not just at the beginning, but continue to scale. So even if you are doing well in native, but you want to do more, there's so much resources there with unbiased experts spending way more money.
Kyle, thanks a lot. I think we should do a referral link.
Well, we will at least put the Native Hub link in the show notes so people can go check them out. But I just really think it was such an important message. And also I really appreciate your time because I think this is such a great conversation. It's good to know that there are amazing traffic sources that people might not be tapping into, and Native's in a really great space and has continued to see some amazing things happen. And again, now we have a resource to go learn how to succeed in that space. Is just really, really exciting. So we really, really appreciate the time. This is fantastic. Tom, do you have any other questions for Andrey?
Lots of questions, but I'm going to go join Native Hub and
yeah, spend plenty of time, work with one of those consults. Well, Andrey, it's fantastic. I always love seeing you, not just because you're well dressed, but you were well spoken and so kind and so great to spend time with. And really appreciate you giving our audience your time. Who is the kind of people that you want to work with?
Agency-wise, we're trying to sort of Native Hub is for everyone, as I mentioned, but agency-wise, we prefer to work with larger brands, performance brands, of course, and brands that would have the highest probability of scaling on native. So, I mean, having launched, I don't know, I want to say hundreds, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to calculate, but quite a few brands throughout my career at Taboola and, a relatively shorter in comparison career at Zeview. We've launched quite a few brands and we know would scale well. So this is lead generation in home improvement or, legal or insurance space. This is D2C, whether this is, something to do with quality of life improvement, health, or wearables. I mean, we're seeing some incredible success with some wearables, whether that's shoes or some shapewear, for instance, or gadgets, for God's sake. I mean, they used to be, exactly. I mean, some of the we've seen some of the coolest shapewear. We saw a brand being quite successful on native. Basically, it was a brand that was doing. They were selling shapewear, but it was also what's it called? The type of shapewear, elastic one, which would force you to exercise because of how like elastic it would be.
Oh, resistance.
So every time you would move. Yeah, like resistance shapewear. So basically, like every time you would move, there would be a certain effort involved. So it would literally help you lose weight because you would exercise throughout the day by moving. I'm like, well, this is incredible for native because that's very specific demography. It's kind of related to weight loss that historically used to convert quite well on native, but it's not just the traditional weight loss, which is a little bit overcrowded now on native. And it's also an awesome product, which is high quality. And on native, like especially most recently, these type of performance D2C brands tend to perform best. So it's no longer just lead gen or content ARP or maybe search ARP or just bits of weight loss. There's plenty of really, really good high quality brands, which you would usually see just on succeeding on social or let's say on TikTok, like TikTok, Facebook. No, you would see plenty of guys running, a Shopify page selling anything from headphones to earplugs to glasses to shoes and trousers, and it actually converts as long as people can find the right angle, the right story to sell it. Because and that's like one of the examples I'm used to having when I'm trying to pitch something. Like if I'm pitching, I used to pitch Taboola, and I would say, "Hey, if I was to sell you, let's say this phone, and we just met, would you buy it from me?" He'd be like, "Andrey, what are you talking about? I just learned your name, and you're trying to sell me something which is worth like $1,000, and I've never tried Apple, for instance. So why would I buy it from you? We have no history. I don't have trust. You're not trustworthy." Now, if we're friends, if I establish the rapport, the credibility, and if I'm telling you a great story, how I used to be with Apple since 2007, and how I was amazed by the original presentation by Steve Jobs and how it sort of captured my attention, how they've continuously improved the product, and how they've always been sort of implementing new features that would continuously improve the quality of my communication. And then, I would talk about how I have 1,000 songs in my pocket, the original line, or how I would have 1,000 pictures, how would have made 1,000 pictures of my close ones throughout the years using an iPhone. Suddenly, you're buying it because you are no longer just buying a piece of technology from a stranger. You're buying memories, songs, games, communication with friends from a person who just told you a good story.
Yeah. Or you get an iPhone now?
And that's what native is about.
Maybe, but just because I need the LiDAR to scan my house. So.
Well, so that's fantastic. So I think we all are very interested in some shapewear and possibly an iPhone. But I love that idea that native and the brands you want to work with, if you have a great product, your larger D2C, come talk to you. And it's not just what you think it is. There's so much more that native could offer. So go to Native Hub for all the listing shares. I don't care where you are, you need to check it out. And for those that fit that profile, we'll make sure, I'm sure Native Hub will access, but you can actually reach out to affiliated@clickbank.com because we want to make sure we protect Andrey's team. And if you feel like you'd be a great fit for a client, reach out to us and we could talk to you and make sure and get that connection for you. So with that, please, everyone, really run it again. Thank you so much for your time, Andrey. Rate, review, subscribe to the new podcast that we have called One Firm, Two Guys. Just kidding. That sounds like a weird video. Don't put that on the internet. What do we say to people before they go?
We say happy scaling and go native.
Yay. See you guys.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.